This video is on basic compositions. What is composition? Composition is the placement or arrangement of visual elements, aka stuff, within an artwork. Composition is used to help keep the viewer interested and draw them into the artwork. Compositions can also help lead the eye around the artwork. There are many different compositional devices that you can use within your photography or any artwork that you are creating. This is a list of many of them. However, we're just going to look at some of the most basic ones. The first set of compositional devices deal with how you are holding the camera. You can hold the camera horizontal, or you can turn it 90 degrees and hold it vertically. Depending on what subject you're shooting, horizontal might work better than vertical. If you have an object that is taller than it is wide, vertical might be your better option. In this example, the spider is taller than it is wide, so the image on the right, which is vertical, is a bit stronger. On the left, the horizontal version, you have a lot of empty negative space on the left and right of the spider, and he kind of gets lost in the space. Here's another example of horizontal versus vertical. In this example, the plane in the background is a lot longer than it is tall. Therefore, horizontal works better compositionally. You're able to see the full airplane. Deciding whether to shoot your subject with horizontal format or a vertical format is entirely up to you. Sometimes one will work better than the other. If you're unsure, shoot your picture in both formats. Our third way of holding your camera is by tilting your camera. This is by holding the camera at an odd angle. It's not horizontal, not vertical, it is somewhere in between. By tilting your camera, you're able to make an average image more interesting and dynamic with diagonals. These are some examples shot with a tilted camera. In many of these pictures, you're able to get more of a feel of motion, such as the examples on the bottom, or you can help accentuate an object, like the top two images of the cars. One thing you should always consider when taking your photos is the rule of thirds. So with rule of thirds, you're essentially dividing up your photograph into a tic-tac-toe board. The areas where the board lines intersect is where you want the focal point or main subject of your image to be. So in the diagram on the right, we have the 4 circles that are showcasing where those lines intersect. So whatever your object is, you want it in one of those 4 areas. This pushes your subject away from the center and off to one side or the other, or towards the top or bottom of your frame. Here's an example of a flower following rule of thirds. So as you can see, the main focal point of the flower, the center bud, is towards the top right intersecting points, pushing it away from the center and creating a more dynamic, interesting photograph. So here are some more examples of good use of rule of thirds. In all of these, the main subject, the main object, are off to one side or the other, towards the top or bottom. And this can work whether you're shooting horizontal, vertical, or with a tilted angle. These are bad examples. These do not utilize rule of thirds properly. The main subject is right smack in the middle of the frame. The problem with doing this is that the eye is drawn to the center and then it stays there. As a viewer, you're not looking at or exploring the rest of the photograph. You're kind of stuck. In cases where you're dealing with something that's moving, like the seagull in the top left picture, by having it right in the center, you don't get as much of a feel of motion. But if he were off to the left or right, it might look as though he's just entered or just about to leave the picture frame. Another compositional device that you can easily use is called cropping. And this is by moving an image or shrinking down the size of your frame to help prevent putting it in the center. It also is a way to give more focus and interest to what your main subject is. So in this image, on the left, you see the whole subject along with background. The main focal point, which is the insect, gets lost with all the background. By cropping, essentially zooming in, you're able to focus more on the insect and really see the details and not be distracted by the background. Once again, in this example, the top is the uncropped version, so you see a little bit of everything. In this example, the top picture shows the uncropped version. You can see the background and the hand holding the stick up. By cropping, you're able to get rid of the background that's distracting and really focus on the snake, which is our focal point of the image. You can also crop to get rid of distractions. So in this case, the banister of the railing of the staircase is very distracting, and your eyes are focused on that and not of the model in the picture. You can crop by physically moving closer to your subject or by zooming in. You can also crop later on in the darkroom or in Photoshop. Here are some more examples of cropped images. You can see that they are a little bit more interesting. It adds some mystery to the image and allows the viewer to be drawn in. Another way to make your photographs more interesting is by changing your vantage point. The first one is bird's eye view. So with bird's eye view, you're looking down or out at your subject, and this can add a lot more majestic quality to your picture. Pretend that you're a bird, and birds typically are up in the trees or in the sky, and they look down at the world. In all of these examples, the photographer is above their subject, and you get a completely different vantage point. You see things from a different light. It's a little more interesting, and your composition is stronger. You start to see details that you might not normally see. To do bird's eye view, you can physically look down, or it can be someplace that's higher up, like off of a balcony, out a window, or very carefully standing on a chair or a ladder, and then look down at your subject. Worm's eye view is the exact opposite, and this is where you're looking up at your subject. Worms typically hang out on the ground or in the ground, and they look up at the world. By doing so, you're able to once again see things from a completely different vantage point and notice details that you might not normally see. It can also help make objects look a lot bigger than they are in real life and exaggerate their size.